Today's final interview is with letterer, designer, and illustrator Jessica Hische. I've been following Jessica's work for a while, but became officially obsessed when she launched her Daily Drop Cap series. Last week, I stopped by her studio in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, to hear her thoughts on inspiration, type design, and her tips for up-and-coming designers. I hope you'll enjoy her ideas and feedback as much as I did. So, let's meet Jessica.
Hi, I'm Jessica Hische. I'm a letterer and illustrator living in Brooklyn, New York. This is my studio space, which I share with other illustrators. So I got into lettering kind of by accident because I was a broke college student, and rather than spend my last $17 on some sort of okay typeface, I would draw all my own letters instead. It's kind of hard to say things that specifically inspire me because I did work for Louise Feely for 2.5 years, and she was a wonderful inspiration for me. So a lot of my kind of visual inspiration that I get now is still pulled from when I worked from her, because I built up this kind of in my brain library of resources. But I think that you don't have to work for this crazy type person to do that. All you have to do is be aware of all the type that's around you. Go onto design blogs and pick up all the little type stuff that you see, because it's really having that kind of back catalog of influences that are going to help you the most. The only software that I use is Adobe Illustrator, because basically everything that I do is lettering for the most part. I'm taking classes right now to do type design, and type design is very specific to fonts. So things that are meant to be rearranged and re-put together that aren't meant for like a very specific use. So the process that I usually use when I approach a new type project is pretty standardized depending on whether it's for a client and whether it's for me personally. For clients need to see different stages of the project along the way. You can't just say, well, I'll do it exactly as I want to do it, and you'll that's the final and that's it. So usually, especially for editorial work, I'll start out by doing these kind of word association lists, which I find to be super duper helpful. I've seen other illustrators call them mind maps, where they do it in a more visual, kind of sprawling way. Mine generally just tend to be like columnar lists. But then from there, I do pencil sketches, and usually for each project I show 1 to 3 pencil sketches depending on what's needed, and those are not extremely tight. They're pretty close to what they need to be, but I always have to kind of write a disclaimer email that says this is more whimsical than the final's going to be, or I'm not going to show you color because then we're going to just talk about color all the time instead of talking about the concept. And then from there, a client will choose one concept and we'll move to final from there. And then I jump right on the computer. Usually I don't even trace my sketches. The sketches are mostly to just get a general sense of the composition and the idea. And I do all of my real playing and tweaking and moving stuff around in Illustrator. So the easiest part is, generally with lettering you get known as being like a style person. So you'll do one thing and then you'll get hired to do it again and again and again and again. So there will be that kind of style that's the easiest for you to work in. For me, it's certain kinds of scripts. So then that kind of bleeds into the hardest thing. So the hardest thing is to do the opposite of that, to do the work that you're not used to working in. And so the hardest thing for me would be masculine work. And it's really hard to do sophisticated masculine type. It's pretty easy to make things just look chunky and heavy-handed, but to do something that doesn't feel feminine, but still feels like it has a fine hand is really hard. And one thing that I find to be incredibly hard is anything that's meant to look handwritten and masculine. So the main advice that I have is to just look at as much of it as humanly possible. You don't really have to have a formal education in type to learn type and understand type. A lot of the kind of old school type designers will say that you really should have a formal education. And to tell you the truth, like the more formal of an education you have, the more you understand it quickly. But if you look at a ton of type, even if it's as simple as going on to MyFonts or something and typing A, like a capital A in the sample text, and then just searching scripts and just looking at every capital A of every script for hours and hours, you start to build up this vocabulary and understand the billions of different ways to draw a single letter. And the more that you can look at, the more you start to pick this up. So it becomes easier and easier to kind of mix things up and not draw the same letters over and over again. Because a lot of people that are newly into type and starting to get into it, what they end up doing is they have this kind of skeleton of the basic way that they draw an alphabet, and it doesn't vary very much based on that original idea of what they think that their type should look like. And it's mostly just because they haven't been exposed to enough. So the more you expose yourself to different type, the more variation you'll see in your work. So the more influences you have, the more diverse your work will be, and the more you'll be able to kind of pull up these references really quickly.
You can view more of Jessica's work and her beautiful daily drop cap series at jessicahische.com. Thanks so much to Jessica for taking the time to meet with me last week, and I hope you'll enjoy her work as much as I do. Also, be sure to check out her new font, Snowflake, which is now available at Veer.